Welcome back to the Daily Dope Show. I'm your commentator and friend, Brandon Strong. And as you might have just seen, I finally got my fresh new Daily Dope Show shirt, which you can find in the description down below if you're interested in something like that to impress your friends and family during the holidays. Boy, do we got a couple of doozies to talk about tonight. And if you're not subscribed, I am going to make another video after I make this one about the incest shakeup continuing over at Incest Therapeutics, manufacturer of Subsys, which is a little thing about this big, and what it does is it sprays pure fentanyl into your mouth and basically fucks you up instantly. We're going to find out about why that's just terrible. Actually, you don't have to look into that. That's just shitty, all right? Try to manufacture that and just to dump it on people, and then to increase the doses to try to get rid of more of your bullshit. We know what you're doing. We'll talk about that story. But first, we need to get back to the takeover in Michigan. What I'm talking about is the medical marijuana quote-unquote industry that's being taken over in Michigan by corporate interests, big money interests. I'm not even sure if they're really nefarious or, if they're really bad players or whatever. All I do know is that they're coming in with a takeover where their intentions are basically to crush anybody else in the game. We've already seen them come in and use their little guy on the medical marijuana board, former sergeant of state police, Don Bailey, to try to be a tough guy and uses, police connections to basically say, oh, if you're running a dispensary right now, you need to shut it down. Because we wouldn't want any unfair competition for any new people that might want to get in on the industry. And when this came out like that, when I heard that, I knew right away that what he was trying to do is protect these rich, deep-pocketed interests. And it's obvious as fuck. And now we have, we're going to talk about the lobbyists shaping the medical marijuana rules before they're even made and before our eyes. Because Michigan, you don't have to be transparent about it, but, the corruption rules are basically wide open. You can basically do whatever the fuck you want. This particular law that they wrote last year, however, does have some preventative measures written into it to try to prevent the revolving door from corrupting it. And now we have another member of the board that is, kind of iffy. His interest might not be all in the heart and soul of medical marijuana, which basically is just, medical marijuana. It's medicine. People need their medicine, so you should do whatever you can to make sure that the access to medical marijuana is as readily available as possible for these people, instead of treating this whole thing like a big multi-million-dollar, almost billion-dollar industry. All right, let's read this shit. I gotta say, I was curious about this. Who's back here? Well, let's check it out. And this is the building where it's all going down, the Ottawa building in downtown Lansing. This is where they have their little meetings. This is where the Department of License and Regulatory Affairs is. And yeah. So when big businesses open up medical marijuana facilities under the new law next year, they'll know the rules. Well, in fact, they'll have shaped them. Since February, businesses, through a cadre of lobbyists, have been privately weighing in on the potential rules for the new $837 million medical marijuana industry. For smaller players like Elijah Jackson, 26, a caregiver in Monroe County, it's hard to see where he fits into a picture he hasn't helped paint. And quite honestly, dude, I don't know if there's actually people like you on, at these meetings talking or whatever. I know there is, and they're saying a lot, but I don't think it's getting heard. All right, honestly, I don't at this point, Jackson said. I would love to be able to communicate a little more directly with this board and maybe get on a more personal level with them. I would hope to be able to secure at least a 500 count plant license. It would be a dream. That would be the dream, would have to have the license. The state officials who will be in charge of regulating medical marijuana have agreed to personal meetings with big players, gone out to lunch with their lobbyists, and given private presentations to lobbyist groups, according to the records obtained by MLive and the Michigan Campaign Finance Network under the Freedom of Information Act. The action stems from a 2016 law that was set up the framework for regulating marijuana facilities from grow operations to dispensaries, but the legislature left many of the details up to the new Medical Marijuana Licensing Bureau within the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, and the licensing up to the Medical Marijuana Licensing Board, which begins accepting applications December 15th. The department asked lobbyists and others for input through a series of questionnaires, said BMMR Director Andrew Brispo, as it gathered information and educated itself before crafting regulations. Quote, "We need to rely on expertise, and that is individuals that are interested, participants in the industry, their representation, other state regulatory agencies. We really have tried to gather as much information from all those sources as possible." Did you? What about the people that are just, by the hundreds of thousands already in the medical marijuana program? What about the caregivers by the tens of thousands? I'm not sure the number of caregivers, but there's a lot of caregivers, thousands upon thousands of caregivers. Didn't ask many of those. Don't care. I mean, like I said, even if you did ask them and did get some input from them, it's clear that you don't give a fuck about what they're saying. And a lot of the times they're just saying, hey, what about our overage? What do we do with that? And you're going to hear me complain about that constantly as like an overture of my videos about this Michigan shit. What about the fucking caregivers? What about the fucking overage? No one's ever addressed this. This should have been paramount to addressing right along with medibles and concentrates and, quite frankly, facilities licensing. You should have been, while you're thinking about it, oh, you know what? That was another vague thing about the old law, is it didn't fucking say anything about what to do with this overage that everybody's going to have. Let's figure something out for that. And what could you do for that? I could think of a million things. One for sure is that you could let them go to the testing labs and fucking get it tested and then sell it to the dispensaries like they should be able to fucking do and like they've been doing for years now. But nope. No one's hearing our voice. No one's saying shit about anything that we want done, and they're just going to steamroll their bullshit over. And we're going to find out about this, what their bullshit is so far. So there's a very famous quote that says, you can make a law and I'll make the rules and I'll win every time. I can't recall who said that quote, but it's never been more true than in this circumstance, said Rick Thompson, a medical marijuana advocate from Flint. What's shaping up is a battle between the interests of existing medical marijuana shops that seek to stay in business once it's regulated and larger players looking to break into the industry. I don't talk enough about those, but the dispensaries that are existing, yeah, you got to work them in. You got to give them an in. You have to. They're the ones that have been doing this. Now, you can say, well, these guys are just money-grabbing drug dealers. I mean, you could say whatever you want about dispensaries. I've heard every fucking bad thing said about these dispensaries in Michigan, coming from a lot of different angles. And, quite frankly, a lot of times it's patients that are pissed off at them for overcharging for garbage and, and then I hear other complaints about the facilities themselves being kind of like shoddy-ass, like basement-dwelling type shit. I mean, whatever you want to do to criticize them, that is another part of the regulation process. If someone's running a shady ass operation, the kinks are going to get worked out of that in the registration process, or trying to get registered. If they come out and look at your facility and they're not liking it, they're not going to fucking give you a license, man. So people like that they can't complain. If you're running some kind of bullshit where you're ripping people off and your location is some kind of like the back of some abandoned bowling alley or some shit, you probably aren't going to get, even if they didn't have the $500,000 worth of assets showing or whatever it is for a dispensary. I think it's 300,000. Even if they didn't have that, you're not going to fucking get a license if your shit ain't right. These regulations ain't no joke, dude. The state regulations. I'm not talking about the local ones. We don't even know what the fuck's coming down the line for those. But as it is, what was written in the actual public acts, these regulations are stringent. They're really hardcore, man. We're not talking about just like getting an okay nod here. This is big deal shit. So those dispensaries that are operating now, that are tip top and aren't ripping people off and don't have a bunch of fucking contaminated product hanging out, they should definitely have an in. They shouldn't have to worry about too much. They should have an in. Existing dispensaries, which many patients rely on, are operating in a legal gray area that will soon become black and white. Dispensaries will either be licensed or unlicensed, legal or illegal. Former state rep Mike Calton, who sponsored the 2016 law that creates a regulatory system for medical marijuana dispensaries, says he's seen some bad ones. I saw a place I wouldn't buy a hot dog in. You know what I'm saying? It was just looking pretty rough, Calton said. I don't doubt that, you know. I mean, I always hate it when these politicians like come out hard-handed against dispensaries or anything to do with medical marijuana or even regular marijuana for that matter. But in this case, what he says holds some legitimacy. I've not been to too many dispensaries, all right? And the whole time that this law has been in place, and probably more so like in the last 5 years, dispensaries kind of really exploded in Michigan. I haven't really been to more than a dozen or more, maybe 15, 20 tops. And I would have to say that about 1 out of every 5 of them are kind of like what he's talking about, like a little bit like, you know, I hate to do, you know, just not proper. I mean, I'm not going to say I wouldn't buy a hot dog in it. I wouldn't buy a hot dog anywhere. Hot dog's fucking garbage. It could kill you. But, you know, like, would I want to hang out there longer than it took to buy the weed? Probably not. Was it better than a black market dope house? Fuck yeah. So anyway, he said the new regulated market will attract more investors, more capital, and lead to a more professional industry. Now that remains to be seen. Just because somebody's more professional, quote unquote, don't mean that they have the passion to do marijuana operations. Marijuana operations require a little bit of heart and soul into it. You got to have some compassion towards what it is. You can't just be like producing and, you know, crunching numbers and doing, you know, just regular business decisions. And it's also an unpredictable crop. And there's a lot of things that can happen. Now, this chart is interesting right here. What is this? This is basically what they're talking about as being an almost $1 billion industry. And these are some people that are, you know, trying to get in the industry. And these are their lobbying firms right here that are talking to the board directly. And this isn't no fucking joke, guys. This is what they're doing. These guys got a shitload of money and they give it to these guys. And then these guys go in here and grease these guys' palms. There's some kind of thing going on. There's got to be a reason why these guys in here in the board are catering the rules to this fucking gaggle of deep-pocketed interests. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not sure if all these people are, shall I say, doing this for nefarious reasons or whatever. So you got like the National Patients' Rights Association. You got the Helix TCS. I don't even know what this is, but this little chart here is pretty good. I'm going to drop the link to this article in the description below, just so in case you wanted to look at this chart, you could. And it kind of tells you what the investigators of this article know about these. Client unclear. Look at that one. And they go through this lobbying firm. Client unclear. In an email to state officials, lobbyists for Candler, Reed, Corey, and much more. Much more, huh? So you have the Muchmores, who are famously known because Dennis Muchmore used to be a huge lobbyist and consultant for Rick Snyder while he was running for governor, and even after that for a little while, whose wife sits on the board at Nestle And somehow they got sweetheart deals from Nestle because of all this. So much more is already dirty as fuck. I already don't like them being involved in marijuana, and there's no fucking way they should be, especially with a secret fucking client. This is just all really disturbing to me because as I keep saying, my refrain is all these fuckers are the Republicans that tried to run Responsible Michigan, which was a Republican platform of legalizing marijuana where only 10 people were involved in the industry. These guys are involved in this. I guarantee you all the people that was involved in Responsible Michigan are involved in this shit right here. If you don't believe me, go one step farther and find out exactly who the names behind these, they hide behind these groups. You'll find them in there. I guarantee it. Former members of the Republican Party. Of Royal Oak, the Michigan Republican Party, they're still Republicans, but they used to be sitting directors and board members of the Republican Party of Michigan. You have prosecutors, former cops, former detectives, former FBI agent. I mean, these people, they used to arrest you for marijuana. They used to arrest you. They still do arrest you for marijuana. Their friends do. And yet, they're sitting one step away from a license through a fucking lobbying firm. And meanwhile, they're on the outside telling them, the fucking board of the medical marijuana board, exactly how they want the rules to work. People who already operate in the industry don't want that shift, they get boxed out. Dan Hall, a caregiver in Jackson, who attended an August meeting of the Medical Marijuana Licensing Board, wasn't surprised to learn that the department has been talking with lobbyists for months before the board started taking public input at their meetings. That's just shady. They're protecting the interests of their cronies that weren't willing to take the risks when we were willing to take the risks. All right, let me read this whole fucking sentence again, man. Tongue twister. They're protecting the interests of their cronies that weren't willing to take the risks that we were willing to take when we were willing to take them, regardless of the reasons and motivations. So he could even be rewinding all the way back to when weed was still illegal and people were still growing and people were still selling it because we believed in it and we, had motivations to do it. A lot of times it was just money for people. Other times it was genuine. I believed in medical marijuana since I learned about what marijuana was back in the 80s when I read Jack Herer's book. So, yeah, these guys don't have anybody's best interest in heart, man. And nobody's surprised, I guess. It's Michigan. It's a bunch of fucking really, really corrupt Republicans running this shit show in Michigan. So who could be surprised that the lobbyists are writing the rules after, 5 years after fucking making a record amount of arrests for just marijuana, and then every year after that, the arrest numbers increase. These people are all involved in that. They feel like they're going to win in the end. Laura sent out a series of questionnaires to lobbyists and other interested parties starting in February. Funny, I didn't get anything on that, and I'm a caregiver. They solicited input, but in most cases, lobbyists weren't entirely transparent, at least via email, and were about where that input was coming from. It's funny that they didn't send me anything because they did send me this book after they got the lobbyists together. And it's a bunch of industry bull crap. I think I threw it away. I don't care. Anyway, they never got a hold of me saying, hey, if in case you might want to be a grower in the new thing, come and do your input. In response to these questions, please see responses I received from one client below, wrote Manny Lentine in a March 21st email to Laura's Colleen Curtis without identifying which client. Brisboe said he knew whom many lobbyists were representing. I think in a lot of cases we met with lobbyists and their clients, so we knew who a lot of them were representing. But in the end, the aggregation of that information, it becomes sort of immaterial as to the source, if you will, because we wanted to collect all perspectives, Brisboe said. We didn't really go out of your way to get anybody else's perspective except for these deep-pocketed lobbyists. And I've talked about Brisboe a lot in the last couple of videos about this. Well, here he is right here. He's just another fucking stuffed suit in Lansing. He don't give a fuck about anything to do with this medical marijuana shit. He's just there to take money and do favors. That's all they do up in Lansing. It's the most corrupt government in the whole United States by many measures. Number one, most corrupt government in the United States is Michigan's. Revolving door, number one reason. Number two reason, Freedom of Information Act requests. You can't do one on the fucking governor. Ain't that about a bitch? And there's no transparency. And even when there is, it's because they're just laughing at you because you can't do shit about it because what they're doing ain't even illegal anymore. They just wrote it into law that, you know, totally being a corrupt piece of shit is allowed. Lentine, who did not respond to requests for comment on this article, is a registered lobbyist. By technicality, he and others advocating on behalf of clients don't have to register. Oh, Michigan, you gotta love it. Michigan defines lobbying as, quote, communicating directly with an official in the executive branch of state government or an official in the legislative branch of state government for the purpose of influencing legislative or administrative action. But only some officials, including elected office holders and the highest ranking department personnel, are considered lobbyable. Oh, ridiculous. For these questionnaires, the responses were directed to Curtis, a classified civil servant who doesn't fall under the act. One company mentioned directly in emails to Moxie, a company that processes and distributes marijuana in multiple states. Yeah, we need that that's what we need is some major manufacturer that's already making millions of dollars. We need them to come in here and rake in more money. You don't even need that, except for you need their handout because they're probably going to fill your Swiss bank account up with some cash or your Caribbean, whatever. Lobbyist Ron Corey submitted their answers to one of the Laura questionnaires. Its representatives did not respond to a request for comment. In one email, Curtis thanked Gary Owen, a lobbyist for one of the state's largest lobbying firms, Governmental Consulting Services Incorporated. This is basically just like a clearinghouse for corrupt fuckers that want to get shit done from the government to come in, dump their fucking suitcase of money on them, and then they go dump an envelope of money on the fucker that they need the favor from. That's what Government Consultant Services Incorporated is all about. I mean, their fucking name basically says it. I said it was good to meet with him and someone whose name was redacted to talk about new medical marijuana licensing law and department progress. Why can't we find out about that? Why couldn't we know who his name was? We can't even know who this fucking guy is lobbying for. Wow. Or who this firm is lobbying for. In other emails, Owen asked state regulators, including Briscoe, to attend summits on medical marijuana in the firm's conference room. Well, isn't that nice? Come on over to my cush plush conference room and, you know, kick off your shoes and relax while we talk about the medical marijuana rules. Owen specifically said in one message that even some folks that may be seeking licensure would attend one of the events. Briscoe agreed to attend a July summit. Briscoe said the department's meetings weren't limited to lobbyists and their clients. They've spoken at different associations and made themselves available, he said. Recently, the Bureau formed work groups to do more information gathering. The Bureau met with both people who were represented by lobbyists and those who weren't. Quote, we had met with many different people, either individual or in larger groups, Briscoe said. In at least 5 instances, decisions at the legislative and administrative levels have benefited big business. The emails obtained by MLive show that Lentine was able to get language in the state budget that allowed the state to consider a closed-loop payment system for medical marijuana. The system would allow for the state to track money in the marijuana industry so that, you know, when they go back to split it up later, obviously, that's why else would you want just the taxes from marijuana to be on its own and identified as just that, unless you plan on dividing that shit up somehow in some shady way. Unfucking believable, man. Lentine's clients include CS Platforms Technology, which offers such a system, according to state lobbying records, and another called PayQuick that advertises itself as an electronic payment method for medical marijuana businesses. Sounding shady yet, guys? The Department of Treasury doesn't plan to pursue the closed-loop payment system at this time, a spokesman said. That's little dog whistle for, hey, Department of Treasury over here. No one told us about no closed loop system. How about talking to us about it? That's what the fuck that means. Administratively, one of the questions the department circulated was whether people should be able to operate more than one type of licensing, growing, processing, or selling out of a single facility. One of 3 groups whose responses to that question were included in the FOIA request. 2 supported it on behalf of their clients. Quote, yes, growers, processors, and provisioning centers should be allowed to operate on the same location. It allows for the enhanced efficiency and less potential for contamination through material movement and handling, as well as preservation of the plant's medicinal compounds, which are compromised when handled or stored improperly, wrote a company called Compassionate Advisors. In September, the department announced its intent to allow the co-location of such facilities. Other moves the BMMR announced do not directly correlate to the questions it asked lobbyists, but put to big businesses in a position to benefit over smaller ones. We know about that. That's the big money requirements. The law required the board to make sure applicants had the means to operate and maintain medical marijuana facilities, but left it up to regulators to determine what that meant. Now, one of the things I would like to think that it meant is that if somebody was able to be a caregiver this long and still have their head above water, well, then they should be considered because, in Michigan, a lot of caregivers kind of went down in flames, like somewhere about 2/3 of the way through the medical marijuana program that we've already had, probably about half of the growers dropped off after 2 big waves of people just not getting caregiver cards anymore. Now, some people would say, oh, some of them people are still growing, they just don't got cards. Well, whatever. I'm just going by what the numbers say, and a lot of people quit growing, and I've seen it on the ground. A lot of people that thought they could get into the growing weed thing, it's growing weed's not the easiest thing in the world, yo. And they tried, they failed, they lost a lot of money doing it. All right, I get you. You need to make sure, you need to vet people. But one of the ways you could do it is to see if they're already a fucking caregiver. How long have you been a caregiver? You can check the records and then hey, this person is pretty experienced at this shit. And guess what? They still have, 2 pennies to rub together. Even though we're not allowed to make a fucking dime off this shit. At an October meeting of the licensing board, the BMMR announced its intent to require businesses seeking facility licenses to have between $150,000 and $500,000 in startup capital to qualify for the licenses. Those limits are enough to snuff out smaller companies, some said. Quote, come on, guys, let the middle class, everyday guys into this business, said Christine Montague of Ann Arbor, a caregiver who testified at the board's October 17th hearing on the matter. Quote, it looks like it's going to hold us out. That's what concerns me, Montague said. The department also decided to allow businesses to stack licenses for 1,500 plants, meaning they could have multiple licenses and grow double or triple or quadruple the plants in a single location. That's something the law doesn't contemplate, but some businesses supported through their lobbyists' responses to the questionnaires. There are some questions the department still hasn't settled. So, was this thing here, it almost seems like the questionnaire was pushing some buttons like, hey guys, what do you think we should do to cut out the little guys? That's basically what I fucking get from that. It was a question and then with a blank, fill in the blank. There are some questions the department still hasn't settled. It asked for input on things like whether businesses should have to start new medical marijuana from seed or could transition in bigger plants from current caregivers so they would have the medical marijuana available sooner. They don't give a fuck about that. It asked what the mandatory testing standards for medical marijuana should be. The department hasn't answered those questions yet. That's because these lobbyists don't fucking know any of this shit. But somehow they have a lot of input from lobbyists. They couldn't figure out some basic shit that we want to know because we already been in this industry for a while. And we know that there should be certain things that you would want to fucking make standards for, or certain things that you should include in the law. For the smaller players interested in getting into the industries, advocating for themselves is hard when you go up against long-standing lobbying firms and powerful corporations. quote, I would think I'd need to be a lobbyist. I don't have a fair chance off the rip from doing this. I don't know, whatever, said Jackson, the Monroe County caregiver. And there he is, Elijah Jackson. Just a regular guy like me, just a regular guy like you, trying to see where he might fit into this thing. And meanwhile, while he's sitting there talking, they're sitting there trying to figure out how to fit this guy in a jail. Because that's what they want to do to everybody that used to be in the game. They want you gone. They want you to go away so them and their corrupt buddies can fucking make this $800 million a year that they're talking about. George Burko owns 2 hydroponic gardening stores and would like to open a dispensary. He started a group called Evergreen Management to lobby for small business owners in the medical marijuana industry while the legislation was going through. He was going against powerful interests back then, he said, and it hasn't stopped. Quote, it's been very tiresome for us to take on these big guys because they obviously have deep pockets and deep relationships. We were able to beat them legislatively, and now we have a battle with it administratively. Not sure what he meant there. Legislatively, I've been saying that this fucking thing is a takeover and they're going to fuck the little guy out of this shit. I've been saying that since the first video I made about it. All right. And I'm just going to read through this one, maybe find a couple points out here. Because they got this guy on specific lobbying for people that are actually going to get in the business, the people that want licenses, that are his friends. This guy used to be the Speaker of the House. He spent decades as a registered lobbying as a registered lobbyist. Now he's the chair of the new Medical Marijuana Licensing Board. How did that even happen? How do you go from politician that's going to make the laws, actually a really powerful position, Speaker of the House, then you're going to go from that to fucking the biggest lobbyist known to man. I mean, this guy, quote, everybody knows him, is a quote. Everybody knows this guy. How did he get the fucking lobbyist job? Or the Medical Marijuana Licensing Board job? Oh, gee, I don't know. Because the people that actually wrote the law were like, we'll just put one of our guys on the board. You know, the old Speaker of the House turned lobbyist. We'll put him on the board, and basically we can do whatever we want. See how this is working, guys? I don't have anybody on the board. The board's only like 5 people. Some view Johnson as an ethical broker who will enforce state application requirements with an even hand. Who views him there? Just people that have known him for 50 years? That's nice. I don't fucking trust the guy as far as I can throw him. And judging by this double, triple fucking chin thing going on, I don't think I could throw him very far. What's this guy know about anything to do with medical marijuana? Can you tell me that at least? What's his fucking history? How big of an advocate is he? We already have a former state police sergeant who's made marijuana arrests as soon as like 2-3 years ago. We already have one of those guys on the board who basically said marijuana is not medicine and that people with marijuana cards are just a bunch of drug addicts. And he basically empowered a fucking drug addict, like a heroin addict, to fucking, rat out somebody that was running weed. I mean, this guy don't care about nothing, man. And neither does Johnson. All they care about is their own personal little, battle that they've had with marijuana. Whatever that may be. With this guy here, he's just a lobbyist. He takes money from every which direction and don't care about nothing but that. So you had somebody, Senator Rick Jones, a Republican from Grand Ledge, and remember, Governor Snyder formally appointed Johnson the chair of this board on May 26th. And then he terminated his lobbyist registration in November. So that's a couple months there where he was actually on the board and still registered as a lobbyist. And so Rick James, Rick Jones, Republican from Grand Ledge. I wanted the board to not only be squeaky clean, I wanted it to have all the appearance of being squeaky clean, Jones said. In my mind, you would never have a former lobbyist on that board. Yeah, in my mind, you would never have a fucking former state police sergeant who's a prohibitionist on that board. It's a medical marijuana board. Johnson, of course, says, I don't see a conflict with anyone. Here's why. We as a board, we really don't have a hell of a lot of control over it. If they fill out the application, pay the fees, follow every letter of the application, we say yes. If they don't, we can say no. That's such a loaded answer. You're so full of shit with that. You're acting like just every smug politician or, holier than thou preacher or some shit. Where you're acting like, oh, if you follow the rules, you're gonna get your license, man. And if you don't follow every letter of it, though, every letter of it, we can say no. This is just fucking sad, man. So then it goes on to talk about his actual connection with an actual person who's actually trying to seek a license. And, he's going to say all this shit about, oh, come on now. I don't work for them anymore. I only work for them on this other capacity. So under the 2016 medical marijuana law, the licensing board itself can't hire anyone who's worked in the last 3 years for someone who's applied for a license. So basically, all your people that you did lobby for in 3 years back, they don't get licenses, man. That's basically it. But that still doesn't make you fucking clean. Even if you didn't allow anybody or they couldn't get a license because they were formerly your lobbying client. All right, that's cool. Even if that, I still don't trust you. I still don't want you on this board. You're still shady as hell. And even then, 3 years ain't that long. Who's to say you're not just going to do a whole fuckload of favors for someone because down the road, you're going to get them paid back. And also the law is unclear of whether or not that provision is inclusive of board members themselves. So we don't even know. It could be just like, that's just, you can't hire or give someone a license if they've been lobbying or vice versa, or even worked as a government person that passed a law. That's in there too. So there is some safeguards for conflicts of interest, but that's just one of the law's provisions that seek to prevent conflicts of interest among medical marijuana regulators, including a requirement that licensing board members turn in disclosure listings of their personal financial interests. The law directs those disclosures to go to the governor's office, which is not subject to FOIA. Remember that from earlier. Freedom of Information Act requests. So they basically just send their disclosures of financial, possible conflicts of interest, their client information, all that shit. It goes to the governor's office who appointed the people on the board. And shady ass lead pipe Snyder is going to look at that shit and be like, who cares? Fuck it. So there's no requirement that the disclosure be shared with the public. There are medical marijuana patients and business owners who would like to know more about Johnson's financial interests. Rick Thompson of Flint, again, has been a longtime medical marijuana advocate, and he's written about medical marijuana policy in the state since 2009. He said Johnson's appointment to the licensing board raised even more suspicion of large businesses' influence in the medical marijuana rulemaking process. Quote, in the medical marijuana community, we're very concerned about the involvement of lobbyists. Thompson explained, adding that someone on the board could shift policy to favor a certain business in ways that aren't obvious. I just don't trust him, man. I don't trust him. I don't trust Don Bailey. I don't like the board so far. This is all really, really shady business. So, thumbs up to Emily Lawler and Chris Mauger, and also, well, is that Craig? Yeah, I'm sorry, Craig. Emily Lawler and Craig Mauger for their persistence on on this story. And as you can see right here, I thank the authors right here. And I told the haters to go away. And I talk about this. I've been tracking this takeover for most of this year. Find out about Abrogate, Michigan, or Abrogate Prohibition in Michigan. There is really no way to stop this takeover. The only way to stop the marijuana arrests is to delete prohibition. For some reason, Michigan don't want to do full decriminalization to go along with this medical marijuana, or to go along with anything. There's several, before I go on, there is several places where decriminalization has happened in Michigan thanks to grassroots efforts in the local communities. And other than that, though, you're on your own. And for that reason, marijuana arrests have skyrocketed since the medical marijuana program was passed into law in 2008. Regulate marijuana like alcohol is better, but it doesn't even begin to issue licenses until November 2019. With the amount of arrests we have seen just this year, who knows how many more we'll see before 2019 in November. But vote yes on that shit if it's all we have. AbrogateMichigan.org. There's that. So if you're from Michigan and you don't know what the hell is going on, please figure it out. Like, watch a couple more of my videos about this takeover if you have to. And definitely go swing on over to abrogate.org and see about how we can reverse the shitty part of all these legalization efforts. Now, I don't know how it would work, but abrogate would be in a constitutional amendment, so it would definitely override any of these laws that they're just scribbling on paper. This is more like chiseled into stone kind of shit. And it's retroactive, so all these marijuana arrests that we keep seeing happen will be reversed, can be reversed, should be reversed. That's all I got on this one. Went a little bit longer than I thought it was gonna. But yeah, I hope I don't start seeming like a commercial for Abrogate, but I mean, let's face it, my legalize / regulate marijuana like alcohol, that's going to be on the ballot. They already have way more than enough signatures. People are still churning in signatures by the thousands. And I'm pretty sure that when this gets on the ballot, it's going to win in some kind of a ridiculous landslide. So go swing on over to abrogate.org, and I'm going to throw the links to these articles down below. And again, one more time, thank you, Emily Lawler and Craig Mauger, for the articles about the corrupt bullshit happening in Lansing.